One of George Strait's most famous country love songs is Carrying Your Love With Me. But inside sources claim that George is allegedly carrying around secrets too. Shockingly, George's marriage might not be as perfect as it seems. Listen closely, because this is the real truth about George and his wife Norma. George and Norma have been together for 55 years. They eloped when they were teenagers. That's pretty unbelievable, but somehow they are still making it work. Or are they? Sources with inside knowledge claim there is hidden drama between Norma and George, and the shocking rumors went public in the fall of 2022. Last October, sources claimed that George was quitting music and retiring to his gigantic ranch. The alleged rumor started heating up after George and Norma sold their mansion in San Antonio. The shocking price tag for George's mansion was almost $7 million. George's ranch is in Texas, close to the Mexican border. The ranch is so remote, and that's allegedly a huge problem for Norma. There's one town close by with only 100 residents, and the nearest city, if you can call it that, has a population of around 3,700 people. Norma allegedly hates that. One source said that it would take at least half an hour to drive somewhere to pick up milk, but allegedly George loves the ranch because it's so remote. Sources claim that George wants to live far away from other people. The reason for that is shocking. Inside sources allege that George is basically a loner, while Norma loves to go shopping at the best stores. She also loves lunching at fancy restaurants with her gal pals. While Norma likes visiting the ranch, being there 365 days a year is allegedly a deal breaker for her. Close friends of the Straits have allegedly given their inside knowledge. While these sources are unnamed, they say that the ranch has become a major sticking point between George and Norma. Allegedly, George and Norma have totally different opinions, and they're still fighting over this. So the rumors aren't letting up. In fact, a new rumor has recently popped up, and this is shocking. The ranch issue between George and Norma is allegedly so serious that they're close to a breakup. Who knows what the future will bring? But the real and shocking truth is, George and Norma have faced plenty of heartache before. George set the record straight on their marriage decades ago. He said that Norma was the first girl he ever loved. And even though Norma likes fancy stores and big city restaurants now, George and Norma grew up together in a small town. But they weren't always in love. George said that he went on one date with Norma when they were teenagers. And shockingly, it almost ended there. George said that he didn't see Norma for a long time after their first date, until one day, when a crazy thought came into George's mind. He told himself that he was missing the boat. So George got back in touch with Norma and they started dating again. I think George should feel lucky that Norma didn't forget about him after the first date. And even though they were still teenagers, they made a crazy decision in December 1971. George and Norma ran off to Mexico and got married. But when they returned to their small town, they must have gotten into trouble, because they ended up having a small church wedding too. Their church wedding happened in Pearsall, Texas, close to where George and Norma went to high school. This was long before George's music career. In fact, George enlisted in the Army after he married Norma, and he got shipped off to Hawaii after he joined the U.S. Army. If you can believe this, George's country music career actually started when he was stationed in Hawaii. He began performing with a country group that was sponsored by the Army. The group was called Ramblin' Country. George and Norma started a family too. Their daughter, Jennifer, was born in October 1972. It took George years to release his first country single. That happened in 1981. The same year his second child, a son, was born. George's son is George Jr., but everyone calls him Bubba. George became a country music superstar. He claimed to have a fairy tale marriage, as well as 2 great kids. But tragedy struck George and Norma in 1986. Their beloved daughter, Jennifer, passed away in a car accident. Jennifer was in a car being driven by another teenager. That teenage driver lost control and crashed in San Marcos, Texas. This was close to where George and Norma lived, and their whole world came crashing down. Some insiders wondered if George and Norma's marriage would survive the tragedy. Shockingly, George almost made it worse. He refused to talk about the most private matters in his life. The real truth is, George has always refused to speak publicly about Jennifer's passing. Allegedly, the tragic incident has always been too painful for George to discuss. But George and Norma did weather that terrible storm together. And in 2012, George actually mentioned Jennifer during an interview with People magazine. In the interview, George was asked to list the personal and professional things he was most thankful for. George shocked everyone with his confession. George said that a list of things that he was most thankful for would be incomplete unless he included Jennifer. George said that he and Norma were blessed to have had 13 years with their beautiful daughter. But George said something even more shocking in that article. It was a cover story in People magazine, and it was published in December 2012. George was 60 years old at the time, and George announced a final 2-year tour. Remember, George said this back in 2012. He claimed that the decision to retire was really difficult. George said he lost a lot of sleep thinking about it. He even claimed to have had second thoughts and third thoughts about retiring. But some inside sources didn't believe that George would retire, because George said that being on stage was still so much fun for him. And George didn't say he was retiring for good in 2012. He said that he was making new music. He said he would be doing the occasional live performance after his final tour. Still, George gave us a clue in 2012 that touring wasn't as great as we might think. Shockingly, he confessed that traveling was kind of a pain, although one thing made traveling better. Here's another side to that story. George said that Norma had stayed home with Bubba until he got out of high school, but she began to go on the road with George after their son left home, and George called that a blessing. He said in 2012 that he and Norma didn't just love each other, they still liked each other a lot. Hopefully, George and Norma's feelings for each other got them through a vicious rumor from several years ago. Listen closely, because this alleged rumor was shocking. The alleged rumor got posted on Facebook in May 2018. It came out as a breaking news item on a Facebook page called McNews Desk. Allegedly, the rumor was a scandal involving George. The breaking news item alleged that George was the latest entertainer caught up in an inappropriate situation with another woman. This happened during the Me Too movement, and the other woman's name was Emmylou Hayes. If you love George's music, you might start getting suspicious when you hear that woman's name, because Emmylou Hayes was the name of a character in George's love song Check Yes or No. And when the breaking news rumor listed the inappropriate behavior that George allegedly did, it was just lyrics from the song. The breaking news and alleged scandal was quickly proven to be a practical joke on the internet. Although shockingly, the post got liked 34,000 times and it got shared nearly 90,000 times. When it comes to the current rumor about serious problems in George and Norma's marriage, a more recent article in Country Now gave another side of the story. That article from April of this year claimed that George was not retiring from music. Allegedly, George also gave an interview to Polestar. I say allegedly because George rarely gives interviews. George was allegedly quoted as saying that he wants to make a new album. The article even claimed that George said they could bury him under his record company when the time comes. Allegedly, George even set the record straight, because he's talked about his upcoming concerts this year, and you won't believe what George supposedly said about performing. He said he's always had the best fans, and they don't seem to be slowing down any. If all these alleged quotes by George are the real truth, he still wants to perform, and he'll be hitting the road with Norma again. But what do you guys think? Do you believe that George actually said those things, or do you believe that George is actually a loner? If George does retire and goes to live on his remote ranch full time, do you think George and Norma could break up? Let me know in the comments below.